webinar is open, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Vinayak, for making all these arrangements. Good afternoon, everyone, colleagues and friends. It's really my pleasure to welcome all of you to this lecture. I thank for your response. I particularly welcome our two distinguished speakers, Dr. Ramesh Chand, member Niti Aayog, and Dr. Harsh K. Bhanwala, former chairman NABARD. Friends, this is our second initiative which we have taken during this lockdown period. First was relating to some kind of capacity strengthening for our young colleagues. And considering the response of the colleagues, we thought let's have some further discussion on agriculture development related issues so that they have learned the quantitative methods and now they can have first-hand information on what are the real development issues, what are the research issues from the senior people. So in that context, we have just initiated this lecture series. We have been organizing lectures earlier because this is a common thing for the academic institutions. But this series is special in the sense that we are having, let's say, the reach to a large number of people in our ICR, State Agriculture University system. Even outside also, people have shown the interest. Nowadays, the focus of the discussion is basically the impact of COVID. And number of times this has been discussed for agriculture also. But what we are getting the information from the official statistics, the performance of agriculture sector is quite impressive during 2019-20. Growth rate is 4%, what is indicated by the MOSPI. And for the next Kharif season, what are the estimates given by the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare? The sowing of Kharif crops is now I think 35% or 40% higher than what it was last year. So it means during this period, agriculture sector has done well. So therefore, the question comes that COVID has not really impacted agriculture as much as we were really initially fearing or we were just thinking. There have been some impact in some sectors, maybe poultry, maybe floriculture, some areas, maybe some impact on prices. But by and large, agriculture sector has turned out to be some kind of, let's say, the kind of front-runner sector in the Indian economy. Now the question is, in this present context, what kind of role we see for the agriculture sector? How the agriculture sector can be useful or helpful in terms of reviving the economy, providing the employment to the people. So that is the most important thing we are going to now discuss in most of the debates. The government has come out a very elaborative package of 20 lakh crores, out of which 1.5 is for agriculture sector. So there is package for the economy as a whole. There is package for the agriculture sector. There are packages for the, let's say, for other sectors like MSME. So how in that context, the agriculture sector is going to perform and contribute to the economy as a whole. Now these things, and in addition to these packages, there have been number of reforms by the government, and some of those reforms are unprecedented. So therefore, all these things and other issues in the agriculture development, we are going to discuss, and we have with us Dr. Ramesh Chand, who is deeply involved in all these reforms, all the decision-making process. So we are going to listen from him that what are the current issues and how the steps taken by the government, they will be useful. You know, Dr. Ramesh Chand, all of here, those who are taking, participating in this particular event. He is member of Niti Aayog, and of course, he is my predecessor as well as neighbor. So he has deeply studied the agriculture sector and all the new reforms which have come. So he is, in fact, you can say some way architect of those reforms. And he has participated with great deal of analysis, information, and consultation with the colleagues. Another important thing you can say the feature of these reform is that most of these reforms, they are going to be channelized through financial institutions. And in that context, we thought that Dr. Bhanwala is the best person to speak about these things for agriculture sector. There is revival of, let's say, the agriculture credit to have more allocations so that the financial institutions can expand the, let's say, the coverage of agriculture credit. And 1 lakh crore is directly for financing of the infrastructure, all those things. So therefore, new reforms, new agriculture development related issues, and we expect a great role of the financial institutions. So therefore, these two things, what we have got initial feedback from the people who have registered. So these kind of issues they are expecting. So still there are a number of issues, maybe Dr. Ramesh, you can take. One is really how we take in the reform process, how we take really all these states on board. Still in all the areas the government has taken, in fact, this government has taken the maximum number of reforms. But finally, it is MSP and PM Kisan. Other things also recently, things have come, but people have now still questions. So maybe these are the things maybe Dr. Ramesh Chand would like to address besides whatever he is going to speak. And Dr. Bhanwala sir, for you, actually you can say how prepared the financial institutions are to promote the inclusiveness in agriculture sector, because still a large number of farmers, they are outside. There is special provision of this primary agriculture credit societies or cooperative societies, but still how we can bring all the farmers under the, let's say, the preview or under the coverage of financial institutions, so they have access to credit, cheaper credit, usually what they have been paying in the informal sector. So these are two things. And third thing is in the whole reform process, basically, I have mentioned for the credit, but what is the, let's say, the inclusiveness aspect of it? Because in one of the interactions, some of the people ask what we are doing, let's say, for the special people, let's say, for the hilly areas where competitiveness is not that much, women farmers. So how the inclusiveness component of agriculture sector will be coming during these reforms. So with these initial remarks, I know all of you are willing to, ready to listen to our honorable speakers. And on behalf of all the participants, on behalf of the Institute, as well as our association, Agriculture Economic Research Association, I heartily welcome all the participants, and particularly our two speakers who have agreed to spare their valuable time and share their thought with our young colleagues. So, sir, I leave it to floor, but what we can just agree on, so maybe each one, both of you can take 25 minutes each, and I will look at that. If there are some question answers, generic questions, so we can just have 5 to 10 minutes spent later interaction with the people. I will make a summary and I will share with you that what kind of questions are there if you agree. Otherwise, we can go ahead with the lecture and see how the, if there are, people trying to interact or they have some serious questions. So with this again, thank you very much for your time. And now I leave the mic to Dr. Ramesh Chand to deliver his lecture. Thank you, sir. Sir, unmute your, unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh Pal, for setting the stage. Dr. Bhanwala ji, Mr. Nikum, and fellow economists who are there on this network to participate in today's lecture. Uh, in fact, when I received the title, Contemporary Issues in Agriculture Development, I was thinking for a while whether I should restrict myself to speak only on the COVID and related issues, or I should enlarge it. But then I thought that if this lecture has to be only on COVID, then COVID could be used specifically here, that what are the agriculture development issues in the wake of COVID. So I thought Dr. Suresh Pal has a larger meaning in his mind when he's putting this title of contemporary issues in agriculture development. But you know that COVID is so serious that in whatever way we define contemporary, unless we deal with the COVID, unless we analyze COVID, unless we factor in COVID, the entire discussion becomes meaningless. People don't then have interest in this because present is most important. Long run and other things, they just come later. So keeping these things in mind, I have prepared some structure which I will share with you to cover contemporary issues in agriculture development, beginning with the COVID and extending up to long-term issues which were being debated even before COVID-19 struck the world. So we all know about this COVID, which has now affected all the countries, the uncertainty which it has created. Every week we are hearing more scary predictions about growth of GDP, unemployment, and health issues. In fact, we in Finance Commission are required to give our report by October, and we need some credible number on GDP, revenue, expenditure, fiscal deficit, and we settle on something. But when we come back to that in the next meeting, we feel that all those numbers, they are dismantled and they have lost their meaning. We have to work on new numbers. So given this kind of situation, I feel it is really difficult to attach one meaning to contemporary. And I understand that by contemporary, what we should mean in today's lecture is that it is longer than immediate, but focus on current issues of relevance for futures. So we will be discussing COVID, but also in relation to present and also in relation to future. So keeping this meaning in mind, I would like to speak, I would like to cover my lecture in three parts. One is focused on challenge and opportunities of COVID-19. Second is tailoring the situation created by COVID and new initiative and policy environment in the country, even using COVID to put pressure on the government to do some kind of reform. This is the second part. The third is the larger issue related to agriculture development and its overall role in economic development. So I have just put on clock 25 minutes. So if there will be some time, I will deal with that. Otherwise, I will stop after dealing with the first two aspects. You know, like other shocks, people have been debating that COVID is a challenge and COVID is also an opportunity. And we in India are expert in coining the terms that it is a challenge as well as it is an opportunity. But if you look at history, these kind of challenges and opportunities came to India in the past. Being intellectually strong, we have been debating these kind of issues. But if you look at it in terms of actually making use of that opportunity, I think we did not. We missed the bus. We missed the opportunity. The latest example is of WTO. When WTO came, we became so defensive. We became so defensive that all farmer union, all institution, they came with this argument: our farmers are so small. American farmers are hundreds of hectares. How our small farmer will compete with them? So if we sign WTO agreement, we are going to vanish. Our agriculture is going to be spoiled. Then there was a country like China, which became member of WTO for the first time. Rather than being defensive, they became offensive. They consider it that if they are opening, the rest of the world is also opening to them. So they really used WTO as an opportunity. And you see where they have reached in 20 years and where we have reached in 25 years, because they became member in 99. Became member in 1995. And if you look at the reality and if you look at the kind of prediction which people were making, they have been proved totally wrong. In the post-WTO period, India's share in global agriculture trade has more than doubled, which means India's export have been rising at a rate more than 2 times what was the rate of growth in the global trade in agriculture, despite small farmer and all those kind of things. So, friend, it depends how you take the things, whether you always consider it a problem or you really feel that this is an opportunity and we can make use of it. So, if I look at the present situation, I find that this time country seems to be little more serious than in the past. I have been working in the team which was associated with decision making and action on this. I find that this time the political setup is really very keen. They are looking for ideas that you give us the idea. We want to implement these. So it is an opportunity for all of us, for us agriculture economists, that if there is some idea on which we have been working recently or from past so many years, probably now there is a taker who can just take it. So coming to this situation created by COVID-19 as contemporary, I feel there are 6 development issues. These are not exhaustive. There may be others also on which you may pay attention. First is how we can keep growth in agri-food production intact. Yes, so far it is intact, but we had only 3 months period and it was a special period. This was not the period when farmers were buying input. This was not the period when farmers were doing sowing operation. This was the period when the crop had already matured and we only had to harvest that crop. And relaxation were given in the lockdown. So good crop which was there, we harvested it. So far the story is intact, but the challenge is how we keep this story in future also intact. Then second is how we can check disruption in domestic supply. There is ample evidence that there is a serious disruption in domestic supply. You look at whatever limited data on food we have, WPI inflation is negative, but retail food price inflation is more than 9%. Such a big gap and divergent movements are possible only and only if there is a serious disruption in supply. So despite agriculture being put in essential commodity, exemption, etc., you just find that there is a clear evidence of disruption when commodities move from wholesale to retail. And interpretation of that is that when farmer get the price, you don't see inflation, but when consumer pay the price, you see big inflation close to the double-digit kind of inflation. And third is disruption in global food supply. It applies both to export as well as to import. Again, there are clear indications that there is a disruption in global food supply because you look at the global prices of edible oils. whether it is palm oil, mustard oil, soya oil, or sunflower oil, their prices have not increased. But you look at the domestic prices of these imported commodities, you look at domestic prices of pulses without any increase in global prices, you just find that there is a big increase in the prices of those commodities where we have been big importers. So this is third issues that in this kind of movement, there is a disruption in global food supply. The fourth issue to my mind is that biosecurity issues and food safety issues are going to become very, very important in future. Another important issue is now export is very important for Indian agriculture. I wrote on this earlier also that now our growth rate of agriculture is 50% more than what is required to meet the domestic demand. I'm not talking as per the norm, as per the actual demand is concerned. Growth is 3% long-term growth, and demand is absorbing only 2% of the growth. So almost one third of incremental production has to be disposed through export. So therefore, we have to look at the new geopolitics. What are the new kind of alignments which are happening globally so that we are able to not only keep our export intact, but also to ensure that larger and larger proportion of our domestic production get sold in the overseas market. Then here I think another issue will become important. World is also facing, as I said, disruption in the global supply chain. They are looking for a reliable long-term supplier of food. Can we identify what are those countries with whom we can have some agreement, COVID or no COVID, global food crisis or no global food crisis? We have long-term arrangement with you to supply you the food on some agreed terms and conditions. Already with some of the Dubai-based traders, we have this agreement in the state of Gujarat. I feel we need to have this kind of arrangement much more in the future because WTO is going to get weakened. It is the mutual agreement which will be playing major role in the trade. So immediately in relation to trade, these are the broad 6 factors related to agriculture development which comes to my mind. Now I come to second factor on which Dr. Suresh Pal put a lot of emphasis. That is tailoring COVID with government initiative, with policy reforms, and the kind of package that has been announced. As he has said, I would put that package in 3 categories. First is increased flow of financial and investment resources, which I leave to Bhanbala Sahab. He is in the better know of how much increase is there. But I would say that not only financial, a big change even in the investment flow. When government is saying 1 lakh crore rupee for investment that is related to farm, you can imagine its dimension, that what is the present level of investment and what does the 1 lakh crore means. 1 lakh crore is 60% more than what we are allocating for MG Nrega, 60,000 crore. So this is the first set of initiative. The second is social safety measures that we are now trying to have many Garib Kalyan schemes, public distribution system is getting stronger, strengthened, employment, also their migrant have reached. So that is the second set of measures, social safety measures. Third is the policy measures. All these measures are in fact packaged under the overall goal of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Let us not treat Atmanirbhar Bharat only as a slogan. I feel the way Prime Minister is attaching importance to it, it is quite serious that for couple of not months, maybe couple of years, we have to keep this strategy as a central strategy that Atmanirbhar Bharat. And we also need to understand what is the meaning of Atmanirbhar Bharat, because many people, they did not interpret in the correct way. This should not be misunderstood as self-sufficiency. It is more of a self-reliance. I would just like to quote here what Prime Minister says to make the things clear. When he articulated his vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, he said, uh, this is the time to become vocal for our local products and make them global with a focus on land, labor, liquidity, and laws. So policy reforms have not just come out of vacuum. They are not just imagination of Ramesh Chandra or Ashok Gulati. This is what Prime Minister put it in his vision: land, labor, liquidity, and laws. It is further clarified that India's self-reliance will be based on five pillars: economy, infrastructure, technology-driven system, vibrant demography, and demand. Each word gives us a lot of material for research. We can expand it. What is the meaning of technology-driven systems? Can we make our product more competitive? It is through competitiveness that we have to become Atmanirbhar, not by imposing more and more tariff on what is the import coming into country. Prime Minister further clarified that the idea of self-reliance is not about a return to Nehruvian import substitution model. Similarly, it should be clear that it is not a return to license Raj, permit Raj, or inspector Raj of socialist era. Far from suggesting a centralized top-down model directed from the commanding heights of planning commission, the Prime Minister spoke of freeing Indian entrepreneur and innovation from bureaucratic hurdles. I think we should look at the policy reform from these very important statements which are made by Honorable Prime Minister after he just announced this Atmanirbhar Bharat. One example I want to share with you that how we miss um, uh, the bus and how we miss the real meaning of things. So much we are talking about having geographic indicator, samosa, not samosa, rasgulla, it is not Bengali, it is Udiya rasgulla, kanchapuri, what is that, silk and all those things. What is the commercial gain to us out of it? Unless you create a brand around a geographic indicator, it remains only a matter of pride. It does not get translated into the economic return. So Prime Minister, in his vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, he talked about vocal for local, local to global. So I think we have to see to it that how we can take our these ethnic product, our geographic indicator to global level, and that is in the true sense we can think of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Also, I feel that 1 crore rupees infrastructure which has been announced, what are the area where this investment need to be made? We should not later on find fault. This area, there was no investment needed. So all of you working in pan India, somebody in Tamil Nadu, somebody in Kerala, somebody in Haryana, what are those infrastructure which can connect to farm, which can give benefit to farm? Without losing further time, please start writing on these kind of things. Well, then there are big ticket reforms which were pending for a very, very long period. They will not show results on their own unless they percolate down to the states. And also, if they percolate down at a very, very slow rate, the benefits will be delayed. As you all know, even in case of economic reform announced in 1991, the real benefit in growth started coming in 95, 96. I think this time we should not let it happen that wait for 5 years for benefit to get realized. We should all pick up that how these policy reforms can be translated on ground, what need to be done, what state need to be done, and how we ultimately the focus is farmer and consumer. that how the farmers get the ultimate benefit from these three reforms which have been announced. Yes, I also read in newspaper in some places some disinformation is being spread as if the purpose of these reforms is to stop MSP, stop procurement. I think these are wild imaginations. I was part of most of the discussions. These two terms did not even figure out in any of the discussion. In fact, there is always a thinking in this government how to make MSP more and more remunerative. And you look at past 4 years, how the coverage of MSP has increased. And those who say that government is going to agree to Shanta Kumar report, all those kind of things, I would say that as an insider, I can share this with you with full honesty. It is all rubbish. You see, there are four pillars of food security, India's food security. One is MSP, second is procurement, third is buffer stock, fourth is PDS. If you dismantle one pillar, you have to dismantle other three reforms also. Right now, we require 60 million ton of food grain for National Food Security Act. Can you think of having 60 million ton of food grain if you are not going for procurement to that extent? And if we have to meet the requirement of 60 million ton for NFSA, that doesn't mean we will procure only 60 million ton. We will require little more than that. So I think these things are going to remain intact. There is nothing like that. Maybe some vested interests are trying to deflect the attention, bring the bad name to these reforms. These reforms have happened after a long time. Everybody has written in their favor, but somehow now some questions are being raised. There can be deficiency in the reforms, that some correction need to be made. I agree to that nobody is perfect. So after all, these ordinances will go to Parliament. There is opportunity for people's representative to point out what need to be changed, what need to be improved. And I hope that if there are some concern related to these, they will be addressed there to the extent they are needed. So I would only say that we should work how to facilitate implementation of these reforms, what is needed on the ground, particularly how smallholder can benefit from them. Somebody asked me how a smallholder can bring his produce from a remote area to Delhi or Mumbai. There are institutions for doing that. How Amul milk of a Patel farmer is going to Calcutta. It is not that he is taking that, but there is an institution which is taking that. So we have institution of FPO, we will have institution of aggregators. So it is through those kind of things that you will see that these reform will start showing actual impact on our farmers. But this was first set of reform. There is appetite with the government to come out with other set of reforms. So I will urge you people that government is in a mood. Please suggest other kind of reform. Like we know that some of the states, they have gone for this land lease, model land lease law. Particularly state of Uttar Pradesh has gone for land lease law. I have not seen any paper from our agriculture economist friend on that on that land lease law which is brought by state of Uttar Pradesh. Please write on it. If it has positive point, write on it. If it has some negative point, please write on it. If it is worth emulating by other state, please write on it. Similarly, there is a lot of talk about this DVT without much clarity on it. So what do you think will be the benefit of DVT? Is it something worth pursuing or only it is a fashion? It is only because of trend we are doing it. So I am also doing some job of giving you some research agenda for your search because I myself not now getting time to do search. I look toward you to come out with some evidence-based policy research on these issues. that what do we mean by DVT? If we want to do DVT in fertilizer, what is the best way to do it? What are the pros and cons? So all those things. So that is the second area of reform. The third area which comes to my mind, that is technology reforms, R&D reforms. Again, one day, one friend from USA called me that since now government has started doing reform, please do some reform in agriculture R&D also. So I told her that I am interested in that, but I find big books on what need to be done to agriculture R&D, but I don't find few sentences on what need to be done to agriculture R&D. So let us now scan the literature. Let us now read all those literature and in pinpointed terms, bring the reform in the sharp focus that these are the reforms we suggest should be there in case of technology, which should be there in the case of R&D. So friends, then there is a third set where I wanted to include the larger issues, whether the traditional Lewis hypothesis is relevant in today's world or it has lost its relevance in today's world because of so many things. When Lewis came with two-sector model, he presumed agriculture, no technological change happening. But today, more technological change happening in agriculture than elsewhere. He presumed a lot of employment will be created in industry. But today, most of industry is going for jobless growth. So since already I have taken 25 minutes, in relation to this third issue, I will only read a concluding para and then I will stop there and take rest of the issues in the question answer if you have. So to sum up, in relation to this third aspect of development issue, I feel the context of economic development has changed as employment, sustainability, environmental services, poverty, nutrition, and health have become the major concern of our time. In this changed context, agriculture is seen to play a much larger and different role beyond serving as instrument of industrialization through successful structural transformation. Even the transformation is turning out to be asymmetric. Pronounced in agriculture share in GDP and muted in its share in employment. The role of agriculture in the development agenda, followed by some work by a few development economists in USA. It is now for us to mainstream the main new paradigm under the title Agriculture for Development instead of Agriculture for Industrialization. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your very insightful address of the lecture. You have covered a large number of issues, and you can see in the question answer there is some response from the people. You can meanwhile go through it. I can also summarize at the end, and I am really grateful, particularly for clarifying the issues which were just expressed in some concern. I mean, in some, let's say, you can say by some people that the reforms, they are taking the existing mechanism, which is not the case. It is not at all disturbing the or changing the existing mechanism of food security. So that is, I think, very, very important message for the people. Now I request Dr. Bhanwala, but before that, let me, sir, congratulate you for successfully completing your tenure at NABARD. You have been longest serving chairman of NABARD. You have not only increased the business of NABARD manifold, but you have really touched the life of people there. And that is the true sign of a leader. Sir, we congratulate you for the work which you have done. And we really feel proud to be associated with you, a person, I would say, the excellence in terms of all qualities and professional competence. Sir, now the floor is yours.
First of all, I thank you very much, I extend my wholehearted thanks to you, Dr. Suresh Pal, for bringing me here and also for thanking me for the good innings that we had in NABARD when I was there. And I must compliment all my team and also my background as well also contributed to this because I belong to a rural area and I know what are the problems of rural areas. And I must say that problems of rural areas have to be seen in an integrated fashion. I will start with that and come to all the issues which you have raised during COVID and recent initiatives, as also focus on financial, institutional, and investment requirements, which was mentioned by Dr. Ramesh Chand as well. First of all, let me also compliment Dr. Ramesh Chand for regularly espousing the cause of agriculture at the top level. And I have learned quite a lot during interactions with him. And also, I have also benefited in terms of the requirements which are diversified for agriculture across the country. I would say that rural requirements have to be seen along with the agriculture requirements. The agriculture in isolation can be seen only by a person who doesn't have a full idea of a village. Village is quite a well-integrated economy within itself to the near markets, and also the recent initiatives are trying to take the rural economy to international arena. We have software infrastructure being laid out, and outreach through digital means is increasing across the country. Now, in such a situation, when we are producing for markets, not just producing for food security, I think we have to reorient our strategy. And this reorientation of strategy has to be seen in totality. First thing is, what are the requirements of the markets that we are going to serve? Professor Ramesh Chand just now said that our production is much larger than what we are consuming ourselves. So either we add value, convert this product into a more, a product which is having a larger duration or a longer shelf life, or do we increase consumption by adding value in such a fashion that the same milk, it is being used in different forms, can be used in ice cream, can be used as an ice cream, can also be used as a milk powder, can also be used as cheese, and shelf life also goes up. So if we start catering to our varied markets, and based on that we start producing, number of requirements will come visible, and that's where the recent thrust of reforms is there. 4 pillars of food security were enumerated by Dr. Ramesh Chand, and I think there is a full belief in the country that these 4 pillars are required for doubling farmers' income, enhancing the farmers' income. But farmers' income can also be enhanced by various other measures, by developing also alternate channels to service certain particular markets, which are till now not being covered. If the production can be shown through digital means, can be reached through digital means to distant markets, then we must start with that market first. That's why I would say that some of the people have said, from folk to farm. We'll have to start planning this way. And if we have that thing in mind, then in a rural area, you require institutional arrangements, you require marketing arrangements, you require infrastructure arrangements, reorientation, soft as well as hard.
Sir, your...
Hello? We require soft as well as hard infrastructure. Water is a criticality for us. There we have nearly 49% of our net sown area is covered by irrigation. And I think there's a huge requirement for pushing further for the infrastructure, in irrigation, so that the command area is better developed. There is an irrigation efficiency there in utilization of whatever existing, more crop per drop. That is the nara given by our Prime Minister. I think all these things in terms of better management of irrigation
ऑडियो
infrastructure,
तो मैंने ऑफ कर रखा
irrigation
था, अब तो ठीक है.
infrastructure, which is required, is essential for
हैं?
enhancing the farmer's income, and also will go a long way in enhancing a product, producing throughout the year varied vegetables at various locations, catering to various requirements. To be specific, also other horticulture produce. You know that our food production has gone up. And if you look at the last 5 years, I mean, up to 18, the food production average is taken and the 1920 advanced estimation is taken, then there is a gap of nearly 26 million tons. So this, we need to regularly keep on adding the warehouse infrastructure to our capacity.
Now it's audible.
Although the doubling the farmers income committee, Dalwai committee said that at that time the infrastructure requirement was reasonable, in terms of warehouse capacities, but I feel in the times to come, warehousing requirements have to be enhanced. And also this warehousing has to be seen not as a hardware, it has to be seen like a software. Now, software means that the same warehouse should offer warehousing receipt facility, should also display prices on it, should also ensure that there is a pack house. Also, it is also linked logistically to various other markets. So once you under one roof are able to offer all these services, and also one requires collateral managers. So you will see that there is a larger soft as well as hard warehouse requirement in this countries in the times to come. Second point is that the cold storage capacity, reefer van capacity, as well as pack house capacity is also significantly less than what is required in terms of catering to distant markets, as also in catering to outside markets. The moment we say that we have to build brands, then we must fathom and assess the requirements of the new market. Phytosanitary standards should also be known. The requirements of consumers be well known. And accordingly, once we have the production practices as well as the seed, as well as the genomes to cater to that, then based on that, we have to plan our various strategies within the agriculture department. Now, I feel this agriculture department requirement would necessitate some skill set changes within the departments also. For instance, we might require market research people, we might require IT people in the agriculture department, we might require legal people, we might require social scientists, because the moment we have large number of small and marginal farmers in the country, 85% or so. So we have to, Professor Ramesh Chand also said that if we have to reach to those higher value chains, I think we must combine our production, aggregate our production through FPOs, or earlier also we were doing it through certain other mechanisms. Those will also continue to be there. But if there is a competition in the form of this initiative, which has been just introduced in terms of contract farming, specific seeds can be brought in for contract farming, as also the entire marketing arrangements will also be, the entire changes which have come up will also help in a big way in taking some of the local produce forward into the global markets. I think this will require some of the infrastructure which I've just mentioned, in addition to rural roads, in addition to the assaying facilities at the district level, laboratories, etc. To certain state governments, NABARD has sanctioned projects for assaying, as well as for some of the labs which are required in those areas. We have a warehousing fund from which NABARD is able to extend to state governments some of these requirements. NABARD along with SFAC, under the guidelines of Government of India, is also undertaking farmers producer organizations. There is a mandate to do 10,000 FPOs in the country. I think we have, as of now, around 6,000. But if you look at the quality of some of the FPOs, then the number can also be still smaller. But we also require people to manage these FPOs in a sustained manner. So there has to be an integrated planning for nurturing and building the FPOs, for which probably an arrangement like NDDB which was there to take forward the milk, entire ecosystem building. In similar fashion for FPOs, we need to have something of that kind. Now, when we talk about reaching to markets, we need to give emphasis on startups also, because today startups are solving various problems of agriculture, be it the soil testing, be it the quality control, be it the traceability requirements, be it reaching out to the markets, advisories relating to weather being passed on to various people, price, quality control, quality over internet, pictures, etc., solution to their problems. I think all this is being done, as also the machinery, I mean, the hiring of machinery, because the farm mechanization required, we have seen in critical times there is a labor shortage in agriculture. In my village also, I've seen quite frequently, especially during sowing and harvesting. I think if some of the requirements can be fathomed in such a fashion that over the internet, over the mobile, we have solutions to offer in terms of leasing of farm equipments, I think this will go a long way in solving the problems of the people. I think this is the dream of our Honorable Prime Minister also, that various startups should come forward to solve the problems of rural areas, and that will help in building a Atmanirbhar Bharat also. Now, coming specifically to some of the initiatives which we have taken, which we have been taking up in recent times, particularly during COVID, let me say several initiatives have been taken in the COVID times for agriculture specifically, as also various measures have been taken for small, micro, and medium industries. Or I have a pleasure in telling most of our listeners that nearly 50% of the SME production in the country comes from rural areas. Now, if this is the extent of production which comes from rural areas, then some of the secondary agriculture requirements, industrial requirements of some of the agriculture related areas can also be met more effectively by harnessing the skill sets in the rural areas in a more efficient manner. And I'll mention some of the initiatives which have recently been taken. For agriculture, 1 lakh crore agriculture infrastructure fund has been announced. As told by Dr. Ramesh Chand, this will go a long way, because till now we have various state governments investments coming in, capital investments for, we have seen capital investments for infrastructure in rural areas, and in particular for agriculture infrastructure in many states have been not as much as is required in rural areas. And the paying capacities of people are also not as much as the user charges are required. So you require a long-term resources, long-term investments. I think NABARD has been able to do some of this work through RIDF and various infrastructure funds that we have, like Irrigation Infrastructure Fund, which was conceived by the Honorable Prime Minister, to add nearly 76 lakh hectares, additional hectare of irrigation. And I'm very happy that nearly 46,000 has been disbursed, and 40 projects out of 99 projects have been completed, which would mean that there is a focus from government on completing this projects. Then similarly, now this agriculture infrastructure, warehousing requirement at individual level outside the purview of state governments is going to be so high that once we are reorienting agriculture to market requirements, referment, cold chains, pack houses, fisheries, the dairy processing capacity, bottleneck, all this would certainly require much higher investment than 1 lakh crores. 1 lakh crores has been announced. It will be phased over the years. I think the various financial institutions, which are banks, will cater to the lendings to the requirement of individual people, and they are geared to this. This is a priority sector investment by those banks, and they'll be very happy to do this. For public infrastructure, long-term resources will be made available through NABARD, through various entities, and be it animal husbandry or the fisheries also, it will be made available. In addition to this, liquidity support, because agriculture did very well during this COVID times. I'm very happy to say this. This has had a good growth during this period. Our food production is going to be bumper. Now, under this circumstance, the liquidity requirements of farmers were fully met. And as of now, nearly 70% of the people have indicated in various surveys that whosoever is indebted, nearly 70% is being catered to by the financial institutions and banks. Now, these are being covered through additional 1 crore Kisan credit cards are being issued. Already 22 lakhs were around a month ago had already been issued, and some more will be issued. And from NABARD side, there was a funding for 25,000 crores upfront funding to cooperative banks and RRBs, so that the liquidity arrangements are there with the banks to meet the requirement of all the farmers, be it the Kharif requirement, be it the pre-Kharif requirement in some of the areas. There have been some areas where there has been a loss, especially poultry, and because of the lack of demand. So initially in some of the sectors like dairy and some of the, short duration, where the places having no market access, even in vegetable cultivation, etc. For those, RBI has given a moratorium of 6 months, initially for 3 months, and then subsequently for another 3 months. And this has enabled that the entire repayment can be withheld for loan for 6 months. Not that it is not to be repaid, but it can be paid after those 6 months. Once you have the, once you have the income from the produce, and that gives enough time for the market realization of the market surplus also. In addition, the government of India has also announced that interest subvention during this period would also continue, and would also be made available to the farmers for this extended period of 6 months. I think these are some of the initiatives. We have recently started the Kisan credit cards for working capital requirements of animal husbandry farmers, as well as poultry farmers and fisheries farmers. I think that will go in a long way in meeting out the requirement. This was a long requirement. I have one suggestion to say, and there is already work going on in this. There is a HUC committee which talks about the land leasing initiatives, which model law has been prepared. If the state governments adopt this, then some of the lessee farmers through a formal arrangement can also get access to credit. Presently, they are getting through joint liability groups and through self-help groups. But there could be another way in which they can individually get this credit requirement as well. We have more than 6 crore farmers who are linked through Kisan credit cards. Annually, 9 crore farmers are getting various kinds of agricultural loans. But I see a difference in terms of credit offtake. On one hand, we have places like Jharkhand and Bihar, where the annual credit per hectare is also not even 10,000. On the other hand, we have Tamil Nadu, where the annual credit is more than 3,50,000 crores per hectare. I think we need to bridge this gap, and that's why there is a drive from NABARD, Reserve Bank, Government of India side, that larger credit flow should happen in central, eastern and northeastern areas. And we have seen throughout our IDF that the larger investments can happen in these areas, so that credit absorption also gets strengthened. In addition, certain initiatives have been taken for SMEs also, like a 3 lakh crore fund has been announced, which is collateral-free lending. Whatever was the outstanding in February 2020, 20% of that has to be made available. Repayment period is 4 years. There is a moratorium of 12 months. And I think banks have already started lending for this. And this 20% collateral would be given through the Government of India's entity, organization. And this will help in the emergency credit, which has emerged on account of COVID, and which will be a guaranteed credit also. In addition, there is a 50,000 crore fund, and there is another 20,000 crore for equity, 50,000 for subordinate debt for SMEs. Some of the micro entrepreneurs who exist and small entrepreneurs who exist, who have lost some of the income and have also lost their investments would find in terms of a good support through subordinate debt and equity participation from the scheme. In addition, liquidity support facility was also given to the SMEs. The definition of small and micro enterprises and medium enterprises has also been enhanced in terms of investment, as also there is a mention of the turnover. That will help the larger number of people to get covered under the small and micro categories based on the existing investments, and also small will move to medium. And since this SME lending is a priority sector lending, this will go a big way in extending credit, and some of this credit would also find mention in rural areas, which will give employment to people. So what I'm mentioning in the nutshell towards the end is that there is in addition to the Manrega outlay, in addition to the Garib Kalyan outlay in defined states, 13 states, where the migrant labor has gone, there is also availability of, will be a requirement of labor by rejuvenation of SMEs. I think this investment by banks will certainly initiate production and would also give an impetus to employment generation in SMEs. Further, the infrastructure announced would also go a long way in providing the labor or employment opportunities for the rural people. There is a NABARD financial inclusion survey which says that nearly 35% income of the rural households come from employment, wages, wage labor. I think if 35% comes from there, all this which I've told you, investment in infrastructure as well as the credit facilities for SME and credit facilities for agriculture would certainly drive up the requirement for labor. And this will look future and this will be a bright future in terms of the labor engagement. Already there is a CMI report that the unemployment rate has reduced to pre-COVID times. That was the news yesterday in the newspaper. I think the unemployment rate would further come down with the opportunities being created by the present government. And Atmanirbhar Bharat would certainly be providing a lot of opportunities for employment through all the investments which are likely to happen. I think this is from my side, sir. And Dr. Suresh Pal, I again thank you for giving this opportunity. But let me again in the end say that in terms of institutional arrangements, FPOs, NGOs, SHGs, joint liability groups, all this will support flow to credit. Flow of credit to rural areas. Infrastructure creation at the rural area will also improve the flow of credit to rural areas. And deprived regions, which deprived in terms of credit, would also offer opportunities for better and higher and more diversified agriculture production. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your very comprehensive coverage of the financial issues. Actually, if we really see the revival of the economy, particularly for MSME sector, it has to be through the financing of these institutions, these enterprises. And government has really taken proactive steps through number of things they have taken. Problem with my connectivity. I have two arrangement, but still it's jumping out. So thank you very much, sir. You have very nicely covered all the issues relating to financing of agriculture, coverage of large number of farmers, as well as financing for the infrastructure. And MSME is really has received a lot of attention from the government, and it is going to really put the economy back on the track. And you have rightly said that things have come to a level which is pre-COVID. So thank you very much for your time. And now there are, I think, long list of questions. Can we just see? One thing, sir, Dr. Ramesh Chand, you might have seen some questions, or shall I summarize?
No, I did not see question. There are so many messages. I can't figure out.
There is a one question
which
and
is
answer. Question and answer. I will just tell two.
Is there a, okay. Yeah, it is there. Question answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So two things are there. One is relating to, they say, this 4% agriculture growth. So the question is whether we have really attained the 4% agriculture growth, and given the circumstances, whether we'll continue to attain this rate of growth. Particularly the sectors which have received some kind of setback in the lockdown period. That is, they said fruits, vegetable, and maybe other sectors. That is one thing. And second thing which is mentioned, that you mentioned GI. GI is very important, how we can use that, add value to that. But the question is that they are a small thing. And there is not much capacity with these people who are actually specialized in production of these goods. So how they can be made more commercial? What are the things to be done for them so that they can participate in the international market? So these two things. And third question is relating to whether there is a possibility of bringing more crops under this MSP regime. So particularly there is always discussion on onion, you are part of that, then other from states the demand is coming. So whether there is a possibility having this wider coverage under this MSP actually. And my question is now, what is the information which is coming? Now MSP has become the maximum support price. So given the competitiveness, how actually we can address this thing? And still people are asking for more and more. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh Pal. Regarding 4% growth rate, there are two dimensions of it. One is long-term 4% growth rate. Another is in a particular year 4% growth rate. Sometime back, I did a report under guidance of C.H. Hanumantha Rao. We estimated a very, very robust relationship that long-term growth of Indian agriculture depend upon what is the share of public investment in agriculture. And there is a one-to-one correspondence between the two. So you just find that during 11th five-year plan, a few years before that, country increased public investment. It became close to 4% of GDP agriculture, and India realized 4% growth rate in agriculture. So long-term growth, for long-term growth rate, public investment is very, very critical. As far as growth rate in a particular year is concerned, you know, it depends on so many factors. Monsoon can always spoil the story. But overall agriculture, there are two components. One component which is moving with a stable growth rate, that is animal husbandry and fishery. Second is crop sector, which is still having very fluctuating growth, though over time the resilience is improving. So here in case of agriculture, as of now, what I can say for year 2021 is that growth rate is likely to be little above 3%. And I am placing this optimism on a couple of factors. That if you look at fertilizer takeoff, if you look at seed sale, despite COVID kind of problem which we feel farmer will be discouraged to do certain things, they are not discouraging him. Farmers are coping up. Farmers are strong enough to cope up. Many people were saying that labor has gone from Punjab and Haryana. Some field will remain without harvest. But you tell me, even if single plant of wheat has remained without harvesting, Now there's a lot of problem of labor for transplanting rice, but people are finding ways out. Direct seeding rice is becoming very, very popular. Mechanical transplanting is becoming very popular. Some of the marginal farmers who find they are required to pay 5,000 to 6,000 rupees for transplanting paddy, they are themselves involving their family member to do the transplanting. So farmers have a remarkable system of coping up. Despite COVID, I feel that growth rate of agriculture this year will be more than 3% if monsoon remain normal as it has been predicted by IMD. Regarding GI, point I was driving is that we should not take pride only in having GI. We should see to it that we are able to commercialize that. We are able to earn something out of that geographic indication which appeal to people. And why we are not able to? Because we have not built brand around it. There could be so many ways to build a brand, like Anand Milk Union Limited built a brand Amul. This is how Amul came into picture. And we know that Safal NDDV. So it is Sabji and Fal. So someone gave that name and this brand became important. So brands are created either by business firm or they are created by institution like cooperative. They can also be created by farmer organization. Like in Maharashtra, we have Mahamango, we have Mahagrapes. So these are the ways in which brand can be created. And I feel that brand always help you to earn a premium price. There is a premium for brand over and above what is the intrinsic price of a particular commodity. But that can't be created by one person, two farmer, 10 farmers. That requires some minimum numbers. Only then it can be created. Regarding minimum support price, I think we need to take cue from other countries uh, where the price which they are paying to farmer is quite high, but still they are able to export it. I think there we have to see whether our instruments are WTO compliant or not. If we are giving MSP through the system of procurement, you know that then it influence market price and all kind of distortions are there. But I have been supporting the system of deficiency price payment. That okay, if our farmer deserves that wheat, for wheat he should get 2,000, but market doesn't support more than 1,600. Let market operate at 1,600, but ensure that farmer get that difference of 400 rupees. So these are the ways that in case you want to keep the price that your farmer should get higher than what is the market price, that is what is there in China, that is what is there in USA, then if you try to do this through procurement, then you have to pay a price for it. Then you have to pay a price for it. But I see justification in giving higher prices to farmer in many a situation. But the instrument that we are deploying to give that price, I think that need to be reconsidered, that it should be a combination. For some commodity we require procurement, it is fine. But in other cases, we may not require it. So there, I think we should gradually move toward this system of deficiency price payment. Regarding bringing more and more commodities in the fold of MSP, I feel once these three reforms are implemented and competition is there in the market, probably the need to have MSP will be reduced. Farmer will feel that they are getting better price through competition than what they will get through the public procurement system. So I feel that competition is a much bigger force to give better price to farmer than what government is giving. But there must be good competition. There should be value chain, supply chain. Farmer should become part of that. And then that price assurance kind of things, that in advance you have contract with the farmer, you grow potato, we will buy it at a price which appeals to you. So these are the ways to address the price risk. I think in the modern world, we have to use modern instruments to cover the price risk and to ensure that farmer get better prices. And in many a situation, there is justification to give higher price to farmer than what demand and supply can justify.
Thank you, sir. You have addressed most of the issues, but there are still many items. But two things I would like to flag for you, which maybe again you would like to respond. One is, how do you see this doubling farmers' income and Atmanirbhar Bharat, how they go together and how these two objective influence the agriculture policy, let's say in the years to come. Second is that we have seen the reverse migration in rural areas. And generally in the economic development, we see that labor, they move from agriculture or primary sector to the other secondary and tertiary sectors. So how this reverse migration has really slowed down, and how long it has actually, how much time it will take to correct this process so that people again start coming back to the secondary sector and tertiary sector, because still the wage rates are very high in these two sectors.
Yeah, coming to doubling farmer income, you see many people have
about GMOs to increase the farm income, but that is altogether a different question.
Okay. So coming to this issue of doubling farmer income, in fact, immediately after Prime Minister gave a call for doubling farmer income, we published a policy paper from Niti Aayog. Those of you who are interested, it is available online. There we just mentioned that reforms are very, very important. Why we laid emphasis on reforms? You see, through technological change also, you can increase production and you can increase income of the farmer. But if you come with a new variety which give you say 20% higher yield, it will also involve higher cost, maybe 10% higher cost, maybe 30% higher cost. So 20% yield advantage will rarely get translated in terms of 20% increase in income of the farmers. Now, on the other hand, you look at the price. If a farmer get 10% increase in price that he is receiving, his income increased by 16%. That is the power of the price. It is a simple arithmetic equation. You just do it. Py into y is equal to Py into y minus cost of the input. So since two ways are different, that's why impact of increase in output price on increase in income of farmer is 60% more than what is the increase in price. Whereas in case of technology, it is other way around, that if it helps in increasing production by 20%, the income may increase by 10% or even 5% and like that. So in our policy paper, we have identified that unless we do the reforms to keep farmer, enable farmer to get higher price realization, it will be difficult to achieve this goal. So I am happy that though we in the process wasted 3 years, we came with Model Act in 2017, many states did not adopt it in fully, or they adopted it very, very partly. So what we wanted to achieve through competition, that has not been achieved. You see, many a time we talk about MSP. I just had written that I will share this fact with you. Do you know what percent of crop output sells at MSP? Sometime you do this calculation. I'm not talking of agriculture output, only crop output. Not more than 13% of crop output sells at MSP. Rest of the 83%, 87% sells in the open market through private. So MSP, those farmers who get it, they are happy, it is important for them. But 87% produced doesn't get MSP. For them, competitive prices Very, very important. The second fact, though nobody has raised question on it, I just want to share with you this fear that with this liberalization, complete liberalization of agriculture trading, mandis will close. You see, large number of states, they have denotified fruit and vegetables from APMC, but still fruit and vegetable is coming into APMC mandi and it is selling it. So it is not that after these law have come, one system will close, only privatization will happen. You will see that APMC mandi will exist, but they have to face competition. They will be required to put reasonable charges. They will be required to pay a service to the farmer for which they are taking those charges, like a commission agent taking 2% from the trader. If he provides service to the trader sitting at a distant place about what kind of produce is available and play the role of forwarding agent and take the delivery, ensure that right kind of quality is delivered, the trader will not mind paying that kind of things. But those charges have to be commensurate with the service that is provided. So I think this is how the new reforms will unfold. Regarding this reverse migration, again, I would say that two type of issues. One is that migration is of two types. One is developmental migration, another is distress migration. In many cases, people have moved out of their native place because they didn't have enough to earn at the native place, not that they wanted to take advantage of new opportunities. I feel that this distress kind of migration is not something desirable. If possible, we should check it. We should create opportunity at the native place like BGRI, bringing green revolution to Eastern India. So you just find that many people who under distress were migrating, that type of migration reduced. Second is developmental migration. People want to take advantage of new opportunities. That kind of migration must be promoted and must be encouraged. Regarding reverse migration, I feel that this is a temporary phenomenon. Already some reversal has started happening. You might be reading that some of the people, they are sending buses to Bihar and to other places and chartered buses, and they are bringing those laborers back. It will take time. I feel that this reverse migration which has happened, much of it will be reversed and things will be back to the normal. But certainly those who came out with distress, if things improve at their native place, they will they will prefer to stay back there. There was some more question also.
Yeah, some more, but it's okay, sir. Thank you. I think you have covered most of the major issues, but still you can see some very senior people, they are attending and they have commented and sent questions. Now, sir, coming to Dr. Bhanwala, sir, there are in fact, three questions. First is, I mean, both are related to this inclusiveness. First is related to, let's say, the KCCs, because in the government announcement, it is said that more KCCs, they will be issued to the, let's say, those who have livestock farmer, fishermen, all those things. So how, I mean, how it is different, because those who have land, it is very easy to identify them. It is very easy to, let's say, issue the credit card and recover the loan from them. But for livestock sector and fisheries, so how, I mean, is there some difference, or they will be as good, I mean, responsive people as the landholder, those who have repay back whenever they harvest? So that is first question. Second is related to, again, this revival of primary agriculture cooperative societies, because for most of the farmers, they are close to the, let's say, they are in villages or let's say nearby areas. So they are more close to the farmers. So how the, let's say, financial institutions or the government or the, because state also they have the responsibility, together can revive these institutions because they have been very effective. In some of the states, in fact, they are undertaking other functions also. That is the second question. And third, I think both of you or maybe sir, you can answer, Dr. Bhanwala, that is related to this Fasal Bima. So how it can be made more effective, how, because it is linked with the credit. So in terms of claims, other things, operational aspect of it, because it's maybe slightly from the, let's say your domain, but Dr. Ramesh Chand, if you want to also say something about this. So that is, these are the three questions, sir. So Dr. Bhanwala, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'll respond to these three
Yes,
one by
sir.
one. But
Yeah.
before that, I would also say that the moratorium was there for SME industries also for 6 months. That was not just for agriculture.
Yeah.
As also the support has been extended, liquidity support has been extended, and this 3 lakh crore is also for term lending through non-bank finance companies.
Yeah.
Because these non-bank finance companies are very active in some of the areas in to provide loans to SMEs. So these two, this is the information which I thought I must share before I go to something else. Now coming to Kisan credit card for animal husbandry and poultry farmers. Dr. Paul, you would know that the basis for determining the extent of financial assistance is basically the asset. In case of a crop loan, it is the acreage. And so similarly for animal husbandry, the asset is the farm animal. So NABARD has developed modalities and passed on to the bank, the state governments also, as well as to SLBCs, to pass it on to banks, that what will be the working capital requirement for an animal. And if there is a scheme for 10 animals, 20 animals, then it can be multiplied, and accordingly the working capital assessment can happen. Similarly for 1,000 poultry birds, so in multiples of thousands, it is worked out. So asset-based working capital requirement way has been suggested by NABARD technical officers and passed on to banks, based on which the requirement has been assessed. And some cards have already been issued in some of the states. So it will take time, but this will certainly help those farmers who were landless otherwise, but were primarily, rearing the animals on the basis of a leased-in land, or on a hired land of he's growing. He's rearing poultry at the backyard or something. So this will help some of those farmers. Crop-based farmers would anyway get that assistance based on the land. And if they take fodder and other crops, there are the norms for the same also for finding out the scale of finance for assistance under KCC. Now, revival of PACs, people are claiming that in this country there are 93,000 PACs. The database for primary agriculture society is to be maintained by the registrars of the cooperative society. The whatever latest update is there, which we get, because it is not digitalized in many states, although in some areas it is, 1 or 2 states it is digitalized also. But out of this, nearly 60,000 are functional. That is what the information that we have out of 93,000. And out of this 60,000, if you look profitable, etc., the number is going to be much less. So various studies have been done by the state governments, as also NABARD, as also some other entities, that what are the real causes for the PACs. So various causes can be clubbed under various heads. One can be business related. The domain area is too small. And they were conceived, they were functional at a time when all other avenues for reaching out to farmer were not as well developed. So they could, even without being efficient, they could continue to function because there was nobody else. So today there is an outreach for various input suppliers, etc. In some of the states, PACs are being used as the PDS shops also.
Yeah.
So they are making a functional case in terms of fulfilling the requirement of not only the farmers but also the consumer consumption related requirements. I think to that extent this is still functional in some of the interior areas, but and also subsidized ration gets distributed there, subsidized commodities get distributed there. But in terms of in today's digital world, even local, we have seen in COVID times FPOs selling through digital means.
Yeah.
For their vegetable production and for meeting the requirement of local markets also. We supplied software to FPOs also, so that, like Flipkart or some other place, somebody can, during lockdown, it was difficult for people to move out. So deliveries could be made. So similarly, the IT adoption of PACS is very critical. Unless we modernize PACS in terms of managerial, input, because the PACS people, the secretaries sometimes are not even educated or educated very nominally and are not familiar with, up to date with today's market mechanisms, etc. So all this leads to some kind of reluctance to modernize also at their level, because they are getting wages, etc. But we have very vibrant PACS in Kerala, where they have diversified from production to consumption to distribution to even health services. Yeah. So I think the model of PACS in Kerala requires multi-purpose orientation of PACS. I think for that, IT adoption for better management input is a must, which I feel. So I feel if the PACS have to be revived, they will serve a purpose in rural areas, but some effort are required based on the status of PACS in various states. There cannot be uniform model. But at the national level, I can say that there should be some agency to provide good management input to PACS at the state or national level, as also there should be nationalization. At the national level, state-wise variation may be there based on the requirements of computerizing the PACS. This is what is being conceived and discussed and should be taken forward. I think we have been able to, we have been in dialogue with this on with the Agriculture Ministry, Government of India also, as well as some of the state governments. Some of the state governments have already initiated this. So yes, then they will seamlessly talk to the cooperative banks also based on a switch. And it will be much easier to load applications and get credit as well, all those. Because PACS means primary agriculture cooperative societies, which meet also the credit requirements. So this is doable. Fasal Bima Yojana, there are operational issues, sir. I think various steps have been taken over the years in terms of timely collection of contribution of premium from the government. State governments, despite some subsidized premium coming from Government of India, sometimes that is delayed because on a particular date that has to be passed on to the insurance entity. Sometimes there are delays at the bank level. So we are doing the financial training of the banks that there should not be any delay at their level. Then the question comes is of the assessment of the yields, etc. That takes time. Yeah. And I think application of modern technology is a must. I've seen some pilots in assessment of the same. Some startups are trying to do this work by satellite pictures of certain crops. They are able to distinguish from this crop to that crop based on certain photograph at desired levels of closeness. I think the moment these are mature enough, and one of the banks, one of the private banks has adopted one of these startups for their own needs for a quicker assessment. But the requirement is timely payment of despite the scheme being pretty clear, there are some operational issues which need to be solved in terms of this is at my level. And I think the revised modified Fasal Bima Yojana with this improvement that is at my level, which is at operational levels, can fulfill some of the requirements of farmers, but there are problems as of now. I agree with that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for providing such a insight on these important issues, which will really influence the development of Indian agriculture in the years to come. So I have myself benefited from the, the thoughts which both of you have shared, and there is a lot of response from the people, very senior people. They are responding. You might have seen Dr. Ramesh Chand. So they have keenly watching what we are discussing and what they expect from us. So I thank you very much to both of you for your time and sharing your thought. It has been a really wonderful experience. I am sure all our viewers and participants, they have benefited from this discussion. And still, if they have some more questions, some more clarification, definitely we can get them to connect to you, so that if there is some further clarification required, so that can be communicated. So thank you very much for your time and your thoughts, sharing, and then everything. It's really a great honor for the Institute and the association to host both of you. You are leaders in your respective area, and certainly you have done a lot of things. I said, Dr. Ramesh Chand, a lot of reforms they have taken place during last few years. They were never thought of, basically, the kind of reforms which are coming by the state government, central government. And now I think they were demanded by many people, actually, including professionals. And now sometimes they start asking questions. So very nicely, you have clarified that. And Dr. Bhanwala sir, you have been really a leader in financial institutions. You have done a lot. And certainly your words of wisdom will help the people. In fact, those who are interested to avail the loan, the farmers, producers organization, cooperative societies. So these are the grassroots, let's say, the institutions for which the package has been provided, and I'm sure they will all benefit from the financing facilities and other, let's say, expertise available. And this is extremely important. Now, all the institutions, whatever level they are, they have to be modernized, actually. They have to be identify their goals. They have to be a professional management. Then only they can take part in the development process. So with this, again, I thank you from the bottom of our heart for sparing your time and sharing your thought. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Dr. Ramesh Chand. I always learn from you.
No.
Good you spoke before me.
It is reciprocal.
No, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
wish everyone
sir.
safe life. Let me wish everyone safe life.
Thank you, sir, and same to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Suresh.
much. Thank you.